Well, good morning and welcome back to the Weekly Pulse podcast. I'm Jeff Snyder. I'm the founder of the Morning Pulse and lead anchor for the Broadcast Retirement Network. So glad you found us. So glad you came back. We've got another wonderful, great show for you this week. Our contributors are chomping at the bit to bring you the latest news in retirement to markets, technology, personal finance, so much more. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of the Weekly Pulse podcast. Well, we're going to kick things off with a look at the latest social media trends on the LinkedIn platform. And joining me from LinkedIn, he's actually in our nation's capital this week, Mr. Devin Banerjee, financial services editor for the before aforementioned LinkedIn. Hey, Devin, how are you?
I'm doing great, Jeff. How are you this week?
I'm doing well. You and I traded places because last week I was in the nation's capital for a conference speaking, and now you are in the nation's capital. Hope you get out of there in time with all the traffic here, because there always is like traffic in and around DC.
I know there are some protests going on or demonstrations. I believe the president may be headed back today. Obviously, we're recording this on Friday, but yeah, always traffic here.
Yeah, well, get duck out. There's always your rule of thumb is always take the metro if you can. It's like the New York subway. So you attended a couple conferences, and we're kind of all around the U.S. today, this week. So what's top of mind for you and the folks at LinkedIn this week?
Yeah, absolutely. It was actually a very interesting week on the platform with some really interesting kind of more breaking news topics, of course, in the business world. But I'm actually going to focus on some of our really standout kind of workforce related topics, which, as you and I talk about all the time, are quite unique to our platform and start really interesting conversations. And the first couple I'm going to highlight are about what might be underrepresented, groups in the business community. So the first is about what we might think of sometimes as retirees, but they're actually open for business and working a lot more, and not just working more, but they're becoming entrepreneurs more. So according to some really fascinating data from the Kauffman Foundation, people in the age group 55 to 64 made up over a quarter, 26% of new entrepreneurs in recent years. And that's actually up from 15% about 25 to 30 years ago. So a huge uptick in this age group, accounting for new business startup activity, and actually all over the world. So that jump 15 to 26% was in the U.S., but all around the world, this data is actually showing an uptick in this age group, and it's coming from many different factors, but a lot of those factors relate to just the intergenerational partnerships that we're seeing being struck when startups are occurring. So we're seeing younger entrepreneurs looking for people with more experience and expertise to partner with to start businesses, and that's really driven a lot of this activity. So just really interesting because this age group is one that we don't talk a lot about, especially in the context of startup activity. Some of this may be related, as you and I have talked about, Jeff. This age group is having to work a bit more generally as they realize that what they've earned and, more importantly, what they've saved over their careers may not be enough as people are living longer past retirement. But those are more kind of frontline work upticks that we're seeing driven by those factors. But I think we could see people with resources or people who want to take a bet on a business idea or a startup at this age also start new companies. So really fascinating conversation there.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously, not obviously, but it just makes sense to me that people who want to tap into experience or capital. The general rule is the older you are, the more experience you have, and the more access to capital you have because you've presumably saved longer. So why wouldn't you want to take advantage of people's experience and expertise? I don't know. I just think it's very foolhardy, in my opinion, just to say I'm going to work all with one generation or all with one type of person. I think you really limit yourself in your performance and what you get out of it. That's just my personal opinion. I try to find the best people around me, and if they're my age or younger or not the same gender or same belief system, it doesn't matter as long as we're headed towards the same goal. But that's just
absolutely. Yeah, and speaking of gender, another underrepresented group in leading businesses as founders and owners, have been women historically. Another really powerful conversation we saw was around some new Census Bureau data that shows that women-owned businesses actually accounted for the biggest increase in new company activity over the past 5 years. So new business activity generally grew 9% over that period, but those with women at the helm grew 21%. So a huge proportion of new business activity is being driven by women-owned businesses, which I think is just awesome to see. And again, so many different factors there. One of which that I hear a lot in my conversations is providers of capital, and either equity capital or lenders. So VC investors or bank lenders are really opening their door more to women founders. Now, of course, progress has been a bit slow, and we still hear so many stories of women founders making the rounds, on Sand Hill Avenue in Silicon Valley, or going around other other VC firms and getting a bit of a cold reception. But there is some hope in this data. So another great conversation there on that item we featured with women entrepreneurs weighing in, talking about both their challenges and the improvements they've seen take place.
Yeah, amazing. Absolutely.
Yeah. And then another issue that was really interesting this week is, we talk a lot about how doing good is good for business, and there's always some data or research coming out about that, but there's a lot of talk this week about some National Bureau of Economic Research data, which is very a quite credible organization, founding that firms and companies that embrace mission and go beyond generating just a profit can really attract more job applicants and higher quality job applicants. So these researchers actually launched a real company, recruited workers via Craigslist in 12 different cities in the U.S., and found a 25% boost in applicants and applications just by taking a do-gooder image on their business versus a control group of other new businesses. And more than that, the employees they hired were more productive, and this was just a test, but even willing to work for lower pay than those who brought on without receiving that messaging. So ties into a lot of topics we've talked about, Jeff, over the years now, but really that mission and a do-good, image, and more important than image, a do-good, approach by companies will actually attract more, job candidates, and in this tight labor market, it will still do that. It will attract higher quality ones who are more productive and really signed on to the company's mission and vision.
It's interesting, Devin. It's almost like taking a little bit out of the book of the not-for-profit, right? Come work for the not-for-profit because we have a mission, and this is a mission that you can get behind and believe in, and you're not going to get paid as much because we're not-for-profit. But it's almost like the for-profit is, and I do believe that for-profits can be mission-driven, and there's nothing wrong with being for-profit, but it seems like they've almost tapped into that messaging, or at least in this particular study, have tapped into that messaging, and it does resonate because, as you've said numerous times on this show over the last 24 months, people are willing to forego certain things to be aligned with an organization that meets their societal goals or objectives. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, as we've talked about, companies are increasingly realizing this, and trying to be out there more, taking a stance, taking a view on issues that their employees care about, not just employees, but customers, communities in which they operate, in addition to the kind of legacy primary stakeholder, which are investors and shareholders. We're seeing that stakeholder group really widen increasingly every day now. Yeah, very interesting. Well, Devin, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it, and safe travels. I know it's not easy going from coast to coast, especially when you lose 3 hours, but you'll gain back 3 hours hopefully this weekend. Get some sleep on the plane. But we certainly appreciate your double duty on this network, and I'm sure your colleagues at LinkedIn certainly appreciate your commitment as well. So enjoy, and we will talk to you soon.
Sounds good, Jeff. Take care.
Yeah.
Bye.
Let's switch gears now from social media to technology and consumer products. And joining me on the line from West Palm Beach, Florida, Mr. Daniel Kline. He's a senior technology and consumer products reporter with The Motley Fool. Hi, Dan. How are you?
Hey there, Jeff. I am actually at the port of Miami sitting on a cruise ship as we do this.
Well, you didn't update me with your itinerary, so my bad. So I'm not going to redo the.
It is very hard to know where I am.
It is. You're like the vice president, right? You're in some undisclosed location. Well, it's good. It's glad to have you on the show, and hope you are getting set for a wonderful vacation. Hope the weather's nice too. So what's top?
It is lovely.
Well, good. Hopefully, it's not too warm. It doesn't get. It gets really warm in those parts.
It does, but put a drink in my hand and put me by a pool, and I'll soldier through.
Oh, you were such a soldier there. All right, so let's let's touch base. What's going on in your world, in the world of technology and consumer products? Because there's a lot going on, honestly.
So yeah, I woke up to a story this morning that I found pretty interesting. Amazon very quietly started offering select employees, they weren't all that specific as to who, healthcare services. And basically it's a sort of a marriage of like a teledoc where they can go online and get some basic care through sort of a video appointment, to literally dispatching nurses to their houses. And, you could say, okay, this is Amazon. They're sort of fighting to keep up in the arms race of recruiting employees. Mm-hmm. Maybe this is just internal. But part of me says, like, Amazon owns PillPack. They're moving more into the healthcare space. Maybe this is a prototype of a new Amazon service that, might someday be a Prime offering.
Yeah. And we just heard, I think last week or the week prior, we were talking to Lydia Ramsey from the Business Insider. And I think Walmart has offered healthcare, and I think Best Buy is potentially offering healthcare. So it seems like everybody, Dan, is getting into the healthcare business.
So Best Buy is getting into the healthcare business on the consumer side really aggressively. They bought a company that does home monitoring, so sort of the modern version of the old "I've fallen and I can't get up." That's going to be obviously a huge growing business. And, you look like you might not think that's for you, but as we do this, I'm wearing a watch that tells my heart rate, that theoretically could alert someone if I was having a heart attack. So I think we're getting to the point where you don't have to be, 75 and in danger of falling in the tub to have some monitoring. And you're going to see all sorts of new services, because I think the one thing anyone who looks at healthcare can say is it's broken. Yeah. And you have CVS, creating clinics and more services and sort of ways around the existing insurance system that give people better access to healthcare. I know I've used Teladoc, and it's awesome. I didn't feel well. My wife had been to the doctor. She got a throat culture, had strep throat. It was pretty obvious I had strep throat. So I jumped online, didn't want to leave the house, saw the doctor, made sense. My prescription was sent into the CVS near me. 3 or 4 hours later, I'm taking medicine and all good. So we're really seeing a change, and I like that Amazon is getting into it, but because they're a company that's willing to break things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as you talked about last week, we were talking about, I think, Walgreens operating drones in a portion of Virginia, right? So it seems like everyone is trying to do something in this space, and arguably it is broken. It needs to be fixed. And, I wonder, it seems like if Amazon's offering this as a perk, as a benefit, why wouldn't they test it on their own employees?
Yeah, look, healthcare is largely about access. So if you take a generation that's familiar with doing things online and you give them access to online healthcare, they're going to use it. And if you say, hey, look, I'm your doctor, I'm meeting with you online, but, boy, I don't like these digital readings I'm seeing from your watch. I'm going to dispatch a nurse out there. That's kind of hard to avoid. Whereas if you don't feel well and you have to go to the doctor, you're much more likely to just ride it out. And sometimes, you miss something serious. So, we're going to see a real increase of access and perhaps different pricing models where people have more access to healthcare, maybe not through traditional insurance.
Yeah, let me ask you a question. So, and this is a little off the beaten path, but I think very similarly. And let me start off by asking you the question: how many boomers do you think access their healthcare, banking, etc. online?
So boomers, I guess you would define sort of like my parents' generation.
Yeah, our parents'
People in their
generation.
60s now.
Yeah, 60s and over. Okay, how many of those
So,
people, like my mom's age, your parents' age, etc., are
so
accessing
I
stuff
think
online?
it's pretty heavy, but I think there's a level of duplication. So my mother does most of her stuff online, but she still like prints things out and has records.
Okay.
So, her sisters who are a little bit older, one of them could not figure out how to operate Sling TV when she was visiting my house. So there's definitely a differing. But even my wife's grandfather, who recently passed away, who was almost 100, paid all his bills online. And this is someone who literally his first apartment didn't have electricity. so I think it's gotten easy enough. The problem is, and I think it's important for this audience to know, is you have to be wary. One of the things my mother sends me all the time is, she'll get like a scary note and it appears to be from her bank.
Yeah.
And you really have to check the return address, because if your bank is Wells Fargo, their return address is going to be something wellsfargo.com. It's not going to be hyperx4623 at gobbledygook.com. So you do have to be very, very careful and try and treat your online banking and other things as a you come to them, not they come to you. But it's all really easy. I mean, I don't know. I now have the Apple credit card that everything is done online. Like it's you get a physical credit card, but you don't actually need it. It's more like to mount on the wall than it is to do anything else. So I think if you don't do it, you're kind of the old person, at Publix, and this happens in Florida, paying by check. You might as well be bartering.
Right, and I guess the reason why I was asking you is because one of the things we deal with on the retirement side is we had the OMB look at electronic delivery of certain disclosures for retirement plan participants, and there's an industry association that is fighting this, saying that people at the other age in this age spectrum don't have access to this type of content, or don't know how to use their phones, or whatever the case may be. You just fight it, and I just find it so ridiculous because the banking industry, the healthcare industry, all these other industries have kind of shifted there.
Yeah, and I think we're also moving to a place where there does need to be more education. There's a lot of 55 plus communities that have clubhouses here in Florida, and I'd like to see them do more training in financial literacy. It feels like those programs kind of stopped at teaching older people how to use word processors.
Yeah.
I'd like to see, we have a Capital One bank near us that has a cafe that does all sorts of, younger people start saving for retirement kind of things. I'd love them to have them host a night where they just teach, their older customers how to use the Capital One app. And sort of what some of the things they could do online are. So, I think for a generation that's not used to going to YouTube to learn how to do things, probably we're failing a little bit as an industry in not teaching. Perhaps it's something we can do more at Motley Fool. I'll run that up the chain.
Yeah, and going back to the beginning of the story, I don't know about the employee group that makes up Amazon, but I suspect it's diverse with different age ranges of people, and if they're not going to just limit it to just overly young, they probably want to include other types of people too. So it seems to me that people can adapt and learn how to use different technologies if it's not overly too complex. But if it's too complex, I can't even do it.
Yeah, I mean, look, one of the other things I want to talk about is we talked about the new iPhone a couple of times.
Yep.
And I have the new iPhone, and one of my frustrations with it is while it brings over all your data, it doesn't necessarily bring over all your logins. And so we had this appointment. We've had this appointment for a number of months. And at about 10 past, I start to log in. And Skype says, hey, I don't know you're you. Can I email you? Can I text you? And it took 5 or 6 minutes. Well, multiply that by every single app I have, some of which aren't in my password chain. So there's with technology, and I think this is true in banking and retirement technology, there's sometimes a lot of unnecessary steps. I know that, like, again, not to pick on Capital One, but I use their business account, and the app for their business account has been discontinued. So you have to log in on your phone through the web, and it's just kind of an unnecessary step. And they're eventually going to launch a new app, but you need to sort of message it. You need to really communicate anything that's going to be different, because there's a heavy turnoff factor. I know if my mother goes to like watch Netflix on her iPad and she can't log in quickly, she's going to call me, and if I'm not around, she's not going to watch Netflix. So, and by the way, don't tell Netflix my mom uses my account.
No, I won't do that, but I think you're right. I mean, we have low spans of interest, and if you can't get something working, people just get frustrated. And at the same time, just getting volumes and volumes of information, which is an issue in the retirement space in particular, reams and reams of paper or reams and reams of emails turn people off as well. So I think it's trying to find that happy balance, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think Amazon is the company that does it best of all. So it sort of brings me hope for healthcare. And the example I'll give is when you order, say, an Echo device, Amazon Fire TV, if you order it through your account, it comes already set up. But when you plug it into your TV, it has sort of like very easy to digest, very short videos that play automatically and show you what to do. Right. So imagine if that's how the healthcare program worked. You get your card in the mail, you log onto your computer, and it shows you with big buttons, this is how you can see a doctor, this is how you can get a nurse to come to your house, this is how you can have home health monitoring, whatever it is. I fully believe Amazon understands packaging and how to do that kind of stuff. So my guess is they'll be more customer friendly than, say, CVS or some of the other players in this space.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Dan, great chatting with you, and enjoy your trip, your cruise. I guess it's a cruise.
Thank you, Jeff. I will. I'll talk to you next week.
Yeah, absolutely. Take care. Welcome back, and now we're going to shift gears, talk a little to markets. Joining me on the line, he's a co-founder of Delphi Digital, Mr. Kevin Kelly. Hey, Kevin, how are you?
Doing great. How about yourself?
Doing well. Before we get started, do you want to talk about this innovation forum that you spoke at last week? I thought that might be interesting for the audience to hear about what people are talking about on the blockchain and crypto.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I was up this past Friday at the Stanford. They have Stanford Innovation Week, and so last Friday was a kind of blockchain crypto day. And so I knew one of the guys who was organizing it, and so he asked me to come speak on a panel with a few other I'm going to say crypto experts or industry leaders in this space. It was a really good conversation, a little bit more kind of high level, just getting people introduced to, what crypto is. A large part of the discussion was really kind of focused around trying to debunk some of the common misconceptions or myths that surrounds, crypto and just kind of the whole blockchain ecosystem. So it was really good. We had a great response, had a lot of positive feedback, and a lot of people had some questions afterwards as well. So the interest is certainly still very alive, even though I don't know if you've been watching the crypto markets this week, but it's been a very, very volatile one.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously I don't watch it as much as you. I do read articles every day about it. But just curious, going back to the misconceptions that you were debunking, any quick ones that you might be able to tick off? I'm interested in that.
Yeah, it's more so, I mean, some of the more obvious ones being, the breaking down what the actual crypto market looks like in terms of, if you think about it, the way in which we talk, on this show about stocks and talking about different sectors like technology and financials and things of that nature, you can kind of break things down in a similar type of way within the crypto space, right? So oftentimes I think a lot of people just kind of bucket cryptocurrencies into this kind of broad band or just paint it with one brush where it's Bitcoin and then everything else is trying to be Bitcoin. And, as you start to really kind of scratch under the surface of this space, you find out pretty quickly that that couldn't be farther from the truth, right? There's certainly some competitors that are trying to, go after this kind of store of value, hard money narrative that Bitcoin has certainly captured. the minds and the attractiveness of a lot of people of. But then you have things like smart contract platforms like Ethereum, which there's some pretty stark differences between what Ethereum's trying to do versus potentially what Bitcoin's trying to do, or the target market for each. So just kind of debunking the fact that there is a very kind of diverse, thriving ecosystem within the crypto or digital asset space, aside from just kind of the day-to-day Bitcoin fluctuations that you hear about, and kind of I guess you could say debunking what the differences are between some of those.
Interesting. So in terms of the volatility this week on Bitcoin, any sense, any rationale? I mean, has it something to do with the China-American tariff conversation? Does it have something to do with the attack on the Saudi Arabian oil fields? I mean, it's always hard to point to one thing, but what can you tell us there?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, obviously the ongoing trade disputes and trade war between U.S. and China was certainly one of the catalysts too that really kind of, I think, launched Bitcoin, or I guess you'd say the resurgence in Bitcoin's price back here in earlier in Q2. It's kind of pretty much traded relatively sideways for most of this summer. It's been this kind of longer, what we like to call an extended kind of consolidation pattern. And so the volatility this week, I think really was, it basically broke down below what a lot of technicians would look at as key support levels. And so was there a couple different catalysts that could have played into that? Absolutely. But once it kind of fell below certain levels, you had a lot of liquidations that were triggered, and it was almost kind of more of a technical sell-off than one that was really driven by some type of macro factor, right? Because if you looked at kind of across other different asset classes, you did see a bit of a sell-off in stocks actually just after you saw a pretty big dip in Bitcoin on Tuesday. But the two, when you look at the kind of the drivers behind the two, they certainly seem to be a bit more unrelated. So I think part of it was just kind of this sideways consolidation pattern. Like I said, it kind of broke down, and now it's trying to find support at some lower levels. So long term, I mean, it's not, again, if you're new to crypto or you're starting to invest or think about putting money into this space, it's certainly weeks like this are great for people who still have long term conviction in it, because again, you get to either add to existing positions or to initiate new positions in an asset that's trading cheaper than it was last week. But it certainly has riled up some people, and has certainly kind of brought back a lot of the bears in full force.
Yeah, and I want to shift gears a little bit. We kind of did our segment backwards, but that's certainly fine, because I wanted to hear about the crypto. I think that's important. People should understand that, like any other market, it's volatile. It goes ebbs and flows. So when you look at, I'm just looking at the Dow Jones Industrial Average, which tracks the 30 largest companies, and this has been kind of an up and down week over the last 5 days, and we've gotten close and over 27,000. Now things seem to be dipping a little bit. And again, this is not really representative of every stock out there, but just generally speaking, anything you can comment on for the week in terms of the market. Whether it's the equity markets, the bond markets, all the things that were going on with trade. How does the microcosm that we were talking about before with the Bitcoin and the cryptocurrency, how does that apply to what's going on here on the equity and the bond levels?
Yeah, I think you've got a couple different things at play right now. I mean, obviously there's a lot of geopolitical not only tension, but really kind of drama going on in the White House right now with, the move to, officially try and impeach or have the impeachment process begin for President Trump. A lot of kind of speculation around what that would actually mean for the market. And so obviously a little bit too early to say, what the end result would be. And so don't want to speculate too much, but certainly could jive the market or disrupt things, especially as the ongoing trade war continues to kind of push forward. And we've gotten some indication that trade talks are supposed to restart or continue, at least modestly. But again, we've heard that time and time again, and look where we are today, right? So I still think a lot of people aren't necessarily expecting, a deal to be done anytime in the near term. And then you had today where, the White House basically came out and is starting to, as the headlines read, weigh the limits on U.S. portfolio flows into China, which, I think, again, is something that certainly has spooked the markets. And when you have a pretty big sell-off in Chinese equities and the emerging market equities in general, because China makes up a large part of the MSCI EM index and a lot of the ETFs that track different emerging market indices, China's a big part of that. So when China stocks get hit, obviously the rest of EM's going to get hit. Kind of turns into a risk-off move, and then you start to see that trickle over into the U.S. equity markets with the S&P 500 and the Dow Jones. So, as we talk about constantly, nothing really operates in isolation. But I think a lot of these different factors are kind of coming to a boiling point all at the same time, and it just seems like you wake up every day and you hear something new about what the White House is trying to do or trying to leverage in order to get a leg up on China, and the interconnectedness when it comes to U.S. portfolio flows, right? So people actually investing in one investment vehicle or another, whether it's retirement or institutions, whatever it may be, investing in Chinese companies. I think, again, if you put trade talks aside, just the opportunity. I mean, China is still one of the fastest growing, the second largest economy, and it's still, growing at a pretty rapid rate, even though that pace is slowing. The opportunities are certainly, exist over in China to take advantage of that, especially when emerging markets over, the last decade or so really have underperformed, U.S. equities. So I think, again, if you're talking about free markets and the free flow of capital, the ability to actually find some investable opportunities or cheap investable opportunities, there's a lot that exists in emerging markets, and there's some that exist in China. And I think this is just another kind of blow again to investors out there who don't, maybe just the headlines this morning are kind of spooking some people because they don't know exactly what the extent of those implications are really going to mean for, the Chinese equity market.
Yeah. Let me switch gears. This last question in the last 2 minutes that we have. Passive investing continues to see more flows of capital, whether it's fixed income or equities. And that includes exchange traded funds. Anything that you can comment on there? Why, the who, the how, the why, as to the reason investors will continue to be investing in ETFs and passive funds, instead of actively managed funds?
Yeah, I mean, for starters, active managers, over this past cycle have largely underperformed some of the more kind of passive vehicles, right? Like an S&P 500 ETF is an easy example. And so when it comes to paying, higher fees for active management, because again, it's supposed to be actively managed, the goal is to outperform the benchmark. I think a lot of investors have questioned what the actual value add is there. So I think the move to passive is certainly something that I don't see stopping, but at the same time, I think it's also important to kind of define what we mean by passive investing, right? Because even if you're putting money into, let's say, an S&P 500, mutual fund or ETF or something like that, even through like a 401k program, that you're basically just automatically, investing in, each payment period or each pay period. There's a committee on the other end that's actually, deciding what goes into a lot of these indices as well, right? So the S&P 500, even though it's kind of often thought of as a passive way to get exposure to the U.S. equity market, there is, some pseudo active management that goes on with just the index itself, right? So there, in my view, and this might be a little contrarian, but in my view, I don't really view anything really as passive, because even if you keep money on the sidelines, right, and you're not invested in any of the markets and you keep cash under your mattress, that in itself is almost kind of an active act, right? The act of not doing something is also an action as well. So I think it kind of depends on how you define passive, but it makes sense because there's fee compression, and if you're going to go for you just want basic exposure to U.S. equity market, a cheap S&P 500 ETF that only costs you a few basis points at this point is certainly a more attractive offer for a lot of people than an actively managed fund that potentially could be taking 100 to 200 basis points just in a management fee alone.
Absolutely. Kevin, you are like the Swiss Army knife of markets.
I just read a lot.
Well, you do. Just the ability to go talk about blockchain, go to crypto. We were talking about the markets, and then we just flipped and talked to passive and exchange traded funds, which is great. I think it gave our audience a real in-depth look, and they got all of that in 10 minutes. So good
Fantastic.
for them.
Trying to do my part, my man.
You do more than your part. Kevin Kelly, always a pleasure chatting with you, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Sounds great, Jeff. Have a good weekend.
You too. Bye. Welcome back, and now we're going to shift gears and talk about retirement. And on the line, she's actually en route to Massachusetts the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. She is the intrepid retirement reporter for Market Watch, Miss Alessandra Malito. Hi, Ali.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing quite well. So we know that you are in the midst of traveling up north from New York. So just want to check in with you. What's been top of mind this week for you and Market Watch in terms of retirement?
Yeah, so one of the more popular stories that I did this week was about Social Security's cost of living adjustment. So the actual COLA won't be announced for another month, but one of the analysts at the Senior Citizens League, she's been tracking COLA for years now, actually like decades, and she estimates that the COLA for 2020 will be 1.6%, which is significantly lower than last year. So last year it was 2.8%, but it is in line with what COLA has been for the last decade. So for the last decade, it's been averaging about 1.4%. So, not good news because 1.6% COLA means that you're not going to see very much. If your average monthly benefit from Social Security is like $1,400 a month, you're only going to get about $20 or so in change additional. But it gets worse because Social Security is tied to the price index for urban workers, which is significantly different. So the consumer price index is looking at buying patterns of workers, and it's not looking at the patterns of elderly. So the elderly, they spend a lot differently than urban workers. Workers, they're spending on housing, they're spending a little bit on medical expenses, they're spending on, going out, they're spending on food and homes and all that stuff, whereas the elderly are going to be spending on healthcare. So if you are only getting a slight adjustment because of inflation for the following year, and you have, your other expenses the prices are being inflated significantly more because healthcare costs are rising and they rise really quickly. You're actually getting less buying power with your money from Social Security, so that it has, that's not very good news.
Yeah, that's not very good news at all, especially when you're on the fixed income. And if Social Security is your only income, which it may be for many Americans who do not have a 401k or a pension, that can be very daunting, to say the least. Any thoughts on, have you gotten any rapid reaction to the story from any of your readers or people who, because you often pique the interest of readers depending on what you write. So did this one garner any feedback through Twitter?
It's a lot of people have been really interested in it. They've gotten a lot of the story's gotten a lot of clicks, but not too much it has angered people as much as some other stories that I've written. But so it's not good news, but there's hope. So some politicians who are running for president, and even those who are not, they have made proposals on how to fix Social Security because, Social Security's two trust funds are slowly being depleted, and if nothing's done by 2035, everybody will be getting about 80% of the benefits that they're owed. So there have been these proposals to try and fix that, and in one of those proposals by Representative John Larson from Connecticut, there is this small provision that would change the consumer price index tracking for Social Security. So right now it's CPIW, and he suggests that it be CPIE, which would be tracking expenses for the elderly. And therefore, if something like that were to happen, you would get a little bit more money than what you would be getting now with COLA. So that is good news.
Yeah. So what would that take? It sounds, logically speaking, rather than have it be the basket of goods that everyone is buying, it would be the basket of goods that the elderly or retirees would buy. But what does it take to enact a change like that? Obviously it's legislation, so it has to go through the Congress and that whole process.
Yeah.
I'm assuming.
You've seen how it's been going for Social Security reform. Not well. Nothing has been done, and nothing is probably going to be done for a while because everybody is more preoccupied with other very important matters in the U.S., even though retirement security is obviously up there in priorities, at least for me. But yeah, so it'll take a while for anything to get done, I think. And it's a bummer because there are so many things that affect Social Security. So aside from this COLA, you're also, another thing that I forgot to mention was just around Medicare. So Medicare Part B premiums are going up. And if your premium is, if the increase in the premium is higher than your COLA, you actually don't get any benefit at all. So, any additional benefit at all. So say the Medicare Part B premium is about 8.8. I think it's going to be $8.80 more next year per month. Okay. If you get the average benefit, you get about $20 or $23, something like that. So you're only getting, I think the analyst said, you're going to end up getting like $15 if you get your monthly benefit, and then you also pay for Medicare Part B premium. But if you make less than that, like if you don't get the average monthly benefit, you get significantly less than the average monthly benefit, and your COLA is like $9, and you're actually not going to see any change at all. And that's even worse for these retirees because they do rely on Social Security for their most of their retirement income, and they are paying a lot more money in healthcare costs, and their buying power is, diminished.
Absolutely. Well, I guess there's going to have to be more to come on this. This is obviously an important topic, maybe one that although I know the candidates are focused on a lot of different issues, but it seems to me it's pretty important to take care of our retirees, make sure that whatever they were promised they get, and make sure that it's being indexed appropriately. It sounds like to me it's not. That's just a layperson's opinion, so I guess we'll have to find out more. Allie, always a pleasure talking with you. Safe travels on your way up to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Enjoy your weekend, and we'll talk to you again very soon.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, we're going to shift gears, and I'm very pleased to welcome back to the program Rebecca Maxcy. She is the Executive Director of the University of Chicago's Financial Literacy Initiative. Rebecca, how are you?
I'm great. How are you, Jeffrey?
I'm doing fine. A little tongue-tied this morning, but other than that, I'm doing great.
We all get that way.
Yeah, well, it happens to me a lot more than I'd like to say. So thanks for checking in with us. First, how's everything going in Chicago today?
It's great. It's just started pouring rain, though, so hopefully it'll clear up by the weekend.
Yeah, well, hopefully. And keep that over there. Don't bring it to the East Coast. So what's top of mind for you and the folks at University of Chicago with regards to financial literacy? Lots going on. I'm reading about a lot of it, a lot of stuff in the press. But what's going on with you and the folks there?
Yeah, so one thing that we've been looking at is when we wrote one of the modules on financing post-secondary education, it was a really challenging module to have to pull together, partly because to try and give students advice around a process for understanding the financial aid notification letters was really complex. There's no one set form, so every college or university uses a different form, and it made it really challenging to help provide any kind of guidance. And so it was really, one part of, one small piece of that module that was troubling. And it's been interesting because we've seen so much lately about, student loans and student loan debt in the news. And so we've really been thinking a lot about, on this end, how can we, prevent this from happening instead of concentrating on kind of what can we do about the debt now, also looking at the front end. So we've been taking time to talk to different individuals and look at the problem from all different angles, and it's been fascinating, let's just say. So yeah.
Well, let me ask you, I totally agree. I think you got to come at this from a multitude of directions. If you're just trying to tamp down the over $1 trillion of student loan debt, that itself is a very difficult task. Will take a long time to do that. And then, I think kind of coming at it and explaining to people what, how to maybe avoid or how best to manage student loan debt is probably equally, if not more important, because you can avoid having other generations get into the same predicament that current generations are in.
Right. No, absolutely. I think that's what, we really struggled with, finding a process that's going to work for kids. Like how when I sit down and I get two different letters, how do I know, where I'm getting the most money? And there was a great report out, decoding the cost of college, and this was one thing that we encountered was like, out of all these different, I think it was like about 450 plus letters, there were 136 different names for one type of loan. And for a student to try and compare things and look, it's, and figure out what am I really getting, it's really confusing. And calling, loans awards, and there's just, it would be great if there were some sort of unified or common letter, that all students, could, or all colleges could use, so that students could actually compare. I mean, you think of it sort of like a sticker on a car, right? When you're buying that car, we make every car manufacturer use that same sticker on the window.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, in the 401k industry in particular, we have something called fee disclosure, and you're supposed to, I think they wrestled with this for years at the Department of Labor to lay out a format that the industry, everyone can get behind, to kind of lay out, quote unquote, the costs of a retirement plan. And I would argue to say they didn't go far enough in terms of how they laid it out or what's supposed to be reported, but it was a start. And if you're someone who's applying to Chicago, if you're applying to University of Baltimore, wherever, you should be able to put things side by side and understand the deal that you're getting. And then when it comes to borrowing money, I mean, there must be dozens, if not hundreds, of loan programs out there that people have access to, both from the federal government and then local foundations, right? I mean, does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. And that's when they're called different names and they're listed in different orders and on these letters, that, I mean, it complicates things. And I think one of the big issues is that, they're just not really listing the total cost and what that net cost is going to be. And that's where once they're enrolled and all of a sudden they realize, I'm $10,000-$20,000 plus dollars short, they're in over their head. So, just kind of looking at what are other ways that we can, different organizations can help and kind of push the thinking on this forward. So it's something that's really bothered us ever since we wrote that module, and we're always looking for ways, to improve our own program, and kind of really looking to always kind of go back and look at what we wrote, revise it, make it better. But it's challenging right now because nothing's changed on that front.
Is there something that's required? Like, you do need something from, from the federal government, whoever has oversight over this particular aspect of lending? Do you have? I mean, is there some way to get, what I was describing before, like a common vocabulary, definitions? I mean, is there an industry group or association that has responsibilities for this particular area?
So from what we were able to best understand is that the federal government passes down, the Department of Education passes down some guidelines, but they're just guidelines. And then there is an organization called I think it's NASFA, and they take those guidelines and essentially interpret it and try and help guide colleges and universities, but there's no requirement. There's no one pushing colleges and universities to do it, and it's and from their perspective, they would say that every school offers their own unique package, but I would think that we could all kind of come together and find some clear way to make all the schools what they're offering uniform and show that, so that it makes it a little bit easier for students, so that we're not in this situation.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like making it easier and more transparent is the path forward. Of all the issues that you're wrestling with as a team, is this the number one issue? That the terminology and these different letters and how to break this down, is this top of mind for pretty much everybody there?
Yeah, I mean, this is the one that we really wrestled with the most. We often had arguments about, because we would find different ways that it was being named, and everyone would come to the table with a different name, and like, how can this possibly be? You must be wrong. And then realizing, no, this is actually the way this is, and how confusing that is. So yeah, this is definitely, I would say it's, one of a few, but this is one that's, it's just, we just can't stop thinking about it. It's just hard to, really provide that guidance when there's not a lot there that you can tell students, except here's what to look out for, and here's what to be mindful of, which is pretty general.
Yeah, it almost seems like you need like a consumer reports, because you remember consumer reports. You either had it delivered to your house, or you went to the library to look at a car, or different, whatever it was, and they had done an extensive, exhaustive review or something. And it's almost like you need someone like that to hold to account these various associations, organizations that are issuing these letters that kind of make it homogenous enough so that people can understand it. Because I get that everyone's going to have different incentive programs to get students in the door and paying tuition. I totally get that, but there's got to be some level of homogeneity to make it easy enough for people to understand. Because if you're not, you can't just say, I'm going to go to University of Chicago, or I'm going to go to University of Michigan, and not understand. Like, yes, you're going to get great academics. That's not up for debate. But it's like, you don't want to walk out of the 4 years or 3 years, whatever, or 6 years if you go to grad school. You don't want to walk out with all this layer and layer of debt. It seems to me, just as a layperson, that having this laid out is probably the most important thing before going into a school.
No, I mean, that's what that's to us what seems to would make the most sense, right? Is to have some sort of uniform or common letter, and also that really tells students. I think the one thing that we've heard over and over that is troubling is that these letters that they get are also only estimates. So, when the trustees meet and they decide to increase, the tuition that year, and if it's your award letter isn't going to, might not meet the cost of the increase. And so how, if students don't understand that it's only an estimate, that's problematic too. So yeah, I mean, it seems that, people could work together to find some common way of sharing this information with students so that they can compare and have a chance to really understand what they're getting themselves into before it's too late.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. Anything that we can do in terms of helping, other than obviously I don't know much about tuition or breaking this out, but is there anything that we can do in terms of the show and elevating this issue?
Yeah, and that's a great question. I I haven't thought of the action items yet. I'm still truly trying to make sure I understand it from all angles.
Okay.
But I do think just keeping that idea that how can we address this early on instead of after the selection's already been made.
Yeah.
Like they recently, a lot of states are saying you need to pass out debt letters. So, at the end of every year, you get your letter of, how much money you owe, which is great. It adds more transparency, but it's still too late. What can we do on that front end
Mm-hmm.
to make sure that they really understand? So yeah, I'll get there.
Yeah. Well, it almost seems like you need, when you take a loan, you get an amortization schedule, and that amortization schedule is presented to you, and you have to sign the amortization schedule. You buy a home, a car, any significant good, right? And it tells you how much is principal, how much is interest. It seems like that is a great place to start when someone's signing up to take a loan for school, and then they have a schedule, and then if there are variables, like you're saying, the cost of tuition may go up. That needs to be noted in the disclosure packet that goes with the amortization schedule. I mean, that's,
Right.
because I kind of liken it to, and we're running out of time, but we've got about a minute left, but I kind of liken it to, when people were buying those homes they had variable, adjustable mortgage rates. It's almost the same
Right.
thing where you've got, you're not, maybe not necessarily the rate of interest, but the cost of the good. Like when you buy a car, the cost of the car doesn't change. The cost of the
Right.
car is $10,000, $20,000, and that's what you're lending money to buy that.
Right.
Why couldn't you lock that in for students and make the next class eat some of that instead of continuing raising the rates on people? I mean, it just seems like
now that's an interesting idea.
There you go.
Yeah, right.
Well,
I mean, that could be really interesting.
Yeah, I'm going to get a lot of hate mail on that, but
I was going to say, I think universities and colleges might not like that one very much.
They know, but they also, a lot of them have significant. Last thing I'll say, a lot of them have significant endowments. They can use some of that to offset that. They can get donations.
Absolutely. And when you're talking about the amount of money is in many cases is more than the cost of a car and more like the cost of a house for some of these places. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's having some type of walking them through to some type of schedule or whatever that may be so they truly understand over time what this is going to look like. Yeah.
Rebecca, thanks so much for joining us. Well, best of luck to that. I'm glad at least you identified it and you're wrestling with it as a team, but interested to see what you come up with when we catch up again later.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it. Have a great weekend.
Bye.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Welcome back, and now we're going to shift gears to real estate. On the line, Market Watch's intrepid real estate reporter, Mr. Jacob Passy. Good afternoon, Jacob. How are you?
I'm doing well. Yourself?
I'm doing well. Did you have a nice week?
Yeah, it's been a busy week. Lots of data reports coming out about the housing market, but a fun week.
Well, good. Well, I hope you are angling for a great weekend. You don't have to carry the work home. But
yes.
Before you go on your weekend break, let's talk about some of the latest news. What can you tell us about what's going on with the real estate market these days?
Yeah, so for starters, I kind of came across some interesting data from Realtor.com. So they took a look at the effect that a recent policy change is going to have. So last week, the Trump administration announced that they were going to no longer allow the state of California to set its own auto emission standards. And so you might be thinking, well, what does that mean for, what does that have to do with housing? So, well, first off, California is the largest housing market in the country, larger than any other states. So that's a big deal in and of itself. And also, to some extent, because it's the largest state, also in terms of population, tons of drivers out there, the standards that are set in California can bleed through the rest of the country. So, these effects go elsewhere. But interestingly, Realtor.com basically had a report that pointed out that in California and anywhere really, the desirability of a home is worse when it's close to a major road, and that's for a number of reasons. It's because the noise of the cars going past, lack of privacy, things like that. But another major reason why pollution, why vehicle traffic is bad for home values is pollution. When you live closer to, a highway or, a major road, there's lots more smog, haze, etc. And people don't want to live around that. And so, they found that, around 500,000 people live within a quarter mile of a major roadway. And that's, kind of within the geographic zone that the American Lung Association says is most affected by traffic pollution. So for people's health, if people are health conscious and are worried about, if they have asthma or just worried about, the effect of pollution, they may not want to live in those homes. And there's 500,000 households already in those areas, lots of homes in those areas. And then there's other studies, in recent years that have shown, how much of an effect pollution has on home values. So there was a 2018 study in China, so a little little different, but in China that found residents of a city in China saw a decline in their home or rent prices of around 4% when air quality decreased slightly. And then there was another study in 2015 that showed that people were willing to pay more than $3,000 more for a home when the home was located somewhere where there would be less exposure to smog. So basically, people are willing to pay more to get away from smog. And so basically, the Trump administration's change. Folks have said it could lead to increased pollution in California, and if it does, that will then start having a ripple effect in the housing market as people, literally almost seek higher ground. Go to neighborhoods further away from the major highways. And areas that are just not as densely populated to breathe fresher air. This can also, but then there's also another ripple effect there where, already in California you have this situation where people are having to, drive to qualify. People are having to go further and further out from major cities in order to be able to afford to buy a home or rent. And if you then, couple that with people also wanting to move out of major cities because of the pollution in those cities due to car traffic, then we're just going to see kind of a major upheaval in California potentially. So that was I thought a pretty interesting report. Kind of not exactly what you expect when you hear about more pollution.
No, but is that something? I know you brought up California, and California obviously the largest state, but would the same principles apply? Pardon me, to other geographical areas of the country, more urban areas, Chicago, New York. I mean, California cannot just be the only one impacted. Each of them have emissions groups and laws and regulations.
Yeah, so the same premise applies pretty much wherever you live. Home prices are typically cheaper for properties close to major roadways and highways. And like I said, it's not just because of the pollution; it's also because cars are loud. And if you live near a highway, maybe they put up one of those big walls to block the noise, but then you have the pretty unsightly wall in your backyard, which you may not want. So there's other factors at play, to be sure, but pollution is a major concern, and I think it is also just homes look nicer when the air is clearer and not hazy, and the curbside appeal is big in the buyer's mind, and so this does have an effect, and when it comes to the effect elsewhere beyond California, it is sort of like I said before. California kind of sets the tone for the rest of the country in a lot of ways. A lot of the automakers had already been adapting their mileage standards to the rules set in place by California, since California is one of the largest vehicle markets in the country as well. And it's an automaker. It's easier for them just to produce a car that can meet the standards in California as well as New York, rather than producing two separate cars for two different states. So, there's trickle-down effect there too, and it's something to keep an eye out on. The Trump administration also has been considering bringing antitrust, case against automakers for coordinating on vehicle emission standards. So this is an area that they have been targeting, and California, I think, has already said that they are going to file a lawsuit to say that Trump didn't have the authority to change what emission standards they could or could not set. So it'll be interesting to watch this play out, but kind of you think of pollution in terms of health, or you think of it in terms of wildlife, things like that. You think of it in terms of climate change with rising sea levels, things like that. But it was interesting to see how it can have a more direct and near-term impact on home prices.
Yeah, it's interesting. You just made me think. When I was a kid growing up, we lived in a cul-de-sac just outside Baltimore, so in the county. And my brother and I would play football in the front yard. And I just thinking about these kids. I wouldn't want to grow up on a busy street and play football and worry about the foot. If I'm a parent, I certainly wouldn't want that. I mean, there's a lot of things that would go through, and I'm not a parent, but I mean, things that would go through my mind that would have an impact on what type of home I would want, in addition to the things you outlaid, which is, who the hell wants to consume smog or bad breathable air or loud noise, because if you can't sleep at night, then you can't rest and all those other things. So I think that there's something to it. And, where would we be if we couldn't have some type of lawsuit going on, Jacob? I mean,
exactly.
You always got to have a lawsuit going on somewhere. Well, I certainly appreciate you joining the show this week. Really interesting.
Yeah.
You're definitely knee deep in real estate. Looks like you haven't missed a beat. I know you're just kind of learning it, but it seems like you already know it. So keep it up, and we'll talk to you again next week, my friend.
Yeah. Take care.
Bye bye.
Yeah.
Welcome back, and now we're going to shift gears and see what's going on in Capitol Hill. And joining me on the line, we have our legal eagles, David Levine, Kevin Walsh, both principals with the employee benefits firm Groom Law Group. Gentlemen, how are you today?
We're doing really well, Jeff. Thanks for having us on. I thought this week that David would take the lead, but instead he's declined to. So I'm going to throw it over to him to talk about the Secure Act.
Okay.
Well, because you know what, Kevin, I've been traveling in my time machine this week, so I will go back in time and take over if that works for you.
All right, go ahead, David.
Okay, so this week we're going to talk, and you know what, Kevin's going to talk.
We should redo that.
Yeah, we should redo it.
Okay, here we.
Sorry, guys. I'm sorry, but yeah.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say.
Too long.
I thought you were going to say hello, because then I'm going to, and then Jeff's going to say what's top of mind, and then I'll talk from there. Sorry about that.
Well, okay. So am I doing the hello? You had said initially that you wanted to do the hello, and I would take Secure. David.
You're going to do hello. Then Jeff will come to me, and I'll talk about
Great.
Scalia and the reorg, and then you'll do Secure. Okay? Are we good here or what?
Okay, here we go.
We're good.
3, 2, 1. Welcome back. And no show would be complete without a discussion about what's going on Capitol Hill. And joining me now are the Legal Eagles. They are retirement rock stars, David Levine, Kevin Walsh. Both are principals with the Groom Law Group, an employee benefits firm based in Washington, D.C. Gentlemen, how are you?
We're doing well, Jeff. Thanks for having us on for your first show of the fall.
Oh, it's amazing. Great to talk with you. So, David, what could possibly be top of mind for you and the Eagles this week?
Well, before Kevin does his time travel to talk more about Secure, I'm going to talk about what happened this week with respect to the Secretary of Labor. Secretary of Labor, we now have a confirmed nominee, Mr. Scalia. It is finally a movement forward, confirmed out of the Senate. Yes, this proves that Congress can do something. So he'll be coming in to take over the Department of Labor. Obviously, it's a Republican administration, so you've already had leadership from the Republican administration. And in fact, someone's typing in the background while I'm talking.
Is that me? That's not me.
It's Jeff.
I'm not even touching my keys.
All right, can we do it one more time? I'm sorry.
I'm not. I don't have my computer open.
Oh,
Here we go. 3.
Was it you, David?
no, I don't.
Here we go. 3, 2, 1. Welcome back, and now we're going to shift gears and talk about what's going on Capitol Hill. And joining me, of course, are the Legal Eagles. They are retirement rock stars, David Levine, Kevin Walsh, both principals with the Groom Law Group, an employee benefits law firm based in Washington, D.C. Gentlemen, how are you?
We're doing well, Jeff. Thanks for having us on for the first show of the fall, and we're looking forward to providing an update because Congress is now on a break until October 15th.
Well, amazing. That's awesome. Thanks so much, Kevin. So, David, what's top of mind for you and the Eagles this week?
Top of mind for us is a couple things. First, we actually had Congress move something forward. Eugene Scalia confirmed new Secretary of Labor. What does it mean? Simple takeaway for everybody here is that we have a Republican administration, a new Secretary of Labor that's taken over. Maybe not that much of a dramatic change, but here's a key thing. He got asked questions a little bit about our world of benefits during his confirmation hearing, and he knows our area. Remember, he led the lawsuit against the fiduciary rule. So with the Department of Labor about to issue sometime soon its next update to the fiduciary rule, and as representatives of the department have said, addressing the concept of harmonization, we're going to find out soon exactly what harmonization looks like, and the new secretary will probably have an influence on that. Dovetailed directly into that, and we talked about this on a prior show, was the fact that there's been a reorganization of the Employee Benefit Security Administration taking effect right at the end of the month. And this reorganization will make a big difference because it divides the oversight. Instead of having two deputy assistant secretaries, you sort of have three. You have a career person, you have a political, and then yet another career person. And a lot of the power for regulations and interpretations will now be under a political deputy. Similarly, the regional offices, and we all know Kevin's favorite topic is missing participants in the regional offices. Missing participants is a big focus from the regional offices, but there is now going to be a deputy assistant secretary that is a career, Amy Turner is the reported name, who will actually oversee the regional offices, which we hope can lead to, consistency, enhanced process, and hopefully make it all better for everyone. That's the optimistic spin. But we have to see, does this reorg make for better guidance, better service for all, and better for participants and beneficiaries? I think that's hopefully the goal, and we'll have to see where we go. But Kevin, now as we go back to the future, you want to talk about Secure?
I'm happy to talk about Secure. And, looking back and looking ahead here, essentially in the last week, we lost an opportunity for Secure to move forward. And we've talked about Secure before. It's a large piece of retirement legislation that has things dealing with everything from RMDs to lifetime income to open MEPs. And it's been watched closely now for this year. And then prior this year, it was called RISA. But what happened is there was some speculation that it could move forward during September because the thought now is that it needs to be attached to a must-pass spending bill if it's going to move forward. Government funding was slated to run out at the end of September. On Thursday, Congress passed a continuing resolution which provides for government spending now through November 21st. So realistically, what that sets up for RISA is kind of two ways forward. One is it could get attached to another continuing resolution that funds the government past November 21st. The second is they could do a full year spending bill, and they could include kind of legislation and policy provisions like Secure there. I think there's some sense of optimism about Secure passing this year, but you've heard me be optimistic before. It's going to be interesting to watch this move forward. And as I mentioned earlier, Congress is out now until October 15th, so it's unlikely there's much progress between here and there.
Didn't they just get back? Did they just get back? Guys?
So one of the things that Congress balances is the need to be kind of response to their constituents by being in the district and the need to be in DC. And they've had a working period. It was a short work period in September. So now we do have a period where they're away again.
Okay, I was just joking. It just seems odd. Anyway, well, gentlemen, it sounds like things are moving. Congratulations to Eugene Scalia. I guess we're going to have to see how that all pans out, of course. And my fingers are crossed and toes are crossed and legs and hands and my eyes are crossed, just hoping that we get some kind of passage of the Secure Act or RISA in weeks to come.
Yeah, Jeff, I'm hoping that if I could time travel forward to 2040, that we're not still talking about RISA and open MEPs and lifetime income and e-disclosure.
Go ahead, David.
No comment. I'm focused on going backwards in time because that way I could repeat the speech over and over and over again and have Kevin make fun of me over and over and over again.
Well, guys, I want to say thank you. And to our audience, you wish you could hear all the outtakes. That's all I can say. But they're not for sale, and they never will be played. They're going to be buried in the vault. Kevin Walsh, David Levine, both principals with Groom Law, thanks so much for joining us, giving us your expertise. Enjoy your weekend, and we'll talk with you all very, very soon.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks for having us on.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Well, folks, that wraps up this episode of the Weekly Pulse podcast. Again, so glad you found us and so glad you listened. I know our contributors greatly appreciate it. I hope you actually learned something. And, well, I hope you're not in too much despair, because don't forget, Monday through Friday, we run our show, BRN AM, to give you even more information, more topics, more interviews with people thinking about saving and planning for their financial futures. So until next Wednesday, I'm Jeff Snyder. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you soon.